In this video, I'm going to show you how to make awesome firework photos. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's summertime, and in America, it's July 4th, depending on when you watch this video, of course. But what that means to photographers is it's fireworks season. And I've got a lot of people in the past asking me, how do you take awesome photos of fireworks? For some reason, they come out blurry, or they're just, they look boring. I'll show you how to do that. It's actually a lot less daunting than it appears. Most of it is all in pre-planning. The actual act of taking the photos, simple. Like, it couldn't be easier. So there's a couple things you're gonna need. You're gonna need a tripod or something to rest your camera on that's steady. The more stable it is, the better. And the reason why is because really great fireworks come out of long exposures. And I'll get to that in a second. But the more stable you can make your camera, the better. And it doesn't need to be an expensive not fireworks, it doesn't need to be expensive fireworks. And it doesn't need to be an expensive tripod or anything like that. You could just get a cheapo tripod. As long as it's stable and it's not like, hurricane force winds or anything like that, you really don't have to worry about getting like a $1,000 tripod. The next thing you need to worry about, other than your camera itself, obviously, is the lens. And the lens choice is all about in how you want to take the photos of the fireworks. Do you just want a black background with fireworks everywhere? Or do you want to incorporate the scene and the landscape of the city, whatever it may be? Then make sure you have the appropriate lens. And if you can't decide, it's probably better to just bring kind of like a zoom, a mega zoom or something like that if you have them. And the lens choice really doesn't matter in terms of quality, just like the tripod. I mean, the better you get, the better the photos are going to be. But you can get kick-ass photos with even a kit lens. I've done that in the past, because it doesn't matter how fast the lens is, what the aperture, the lowest aperture, the widest open aperture it can achieve is. Focal distance of the lens does matter. So if you're going to be taking photos with black background, fireworks everywhere, or do you want to incorporate the landscape or the whatever it may be into the subject, it depends. So for example, this photo here is taken at Niagara Falls, and this was shot with a wider lens. I think it was like 14 millimeters, and that's because I wanted to get everything in the scene and not just focus on the fireworks. As you'll see here, this was actually poor pre-planning, because I thought the fireworks were going to appear in a different place than they actually did. So there's this big empty blackness. If you're just trying to do something like this and like, oh hey, black background, that's a different lens. So either bring multiple lenses or a big zoom, whatever it may be, as long as you know where you're going to be shooting and where the fireworks are going to be appearing. I mean, that's like 90% of the battle right here. If you're focusing more on the sky and you're a little bit further away, maybe use a little longer lens. If you're going to do the landscape kind of thing like this, do a wider lens. So other than your lens choice, depending on the focal length that you're looking for, and a tripod and your camera, you don't really need anything else. If you have a cable release, that's great, because the less you touch your camera, the better, but you could always use the timer on your camera. So that's all the gear. Let's focus on the settings. Like I said, you're going to need a slower shutter speed. And why do you need a slower shutter speed? Because the best firework photos are the ones that kind of poof out like that. I'm doing a really terrible job of describing. I need an adjective here and I can't find it. The longer the shutter speed, the cooler they're going to look. Let's just go with that. And this could be anything from like a half a second, like this photo was, or up to a couple seconds. It all depends on whether or not you're trying to get one firework in the scene or a whole bunch of them. If you're trying to get a whole bunch of them, you're going to want a longer shutter speed. So make sure the rest of the settings can give you an appropriate exposure. And this is important, so before the fireworks even happen, one, you're going to want to pre-focus on your scene, so that you're not messing around with the settings while it's happening. But either you shoot in manual and adjust your ISO to the base ISO possible, and then the aperture to whatever aperture you need to get the proper exposure, and whatever the length of the shutter speed that you want, or just use shutter priority. There's nothing wrong with it, and let the camera deal with the ISO and the aperture settings for you. because the part that's really important is the shutter speed. So after you've gotten your shutter speed in, and if you're using shutter speed, shutter priority, or if you're using manual, you have everything set up, and your pre-focus, you're good to go. You don't want to touch the camera. So you can either use the timer on the back of the camera in your settings somewhere to use either a 2-second delay, 10-second delay, whatever, or mirror lockup if you want to do that. Or you can use a shutter release or intervalometer if you really want to get into it. I've made videos on those in the past. They're pretty cheap too if you'd like to use them. If not, your finger is good enough. And really that's all there is to it. Once you have your camera on your tripod, you're set up, you have your settings dialed in to the proper exposure before the fireworks happen, and you have a shutter speed long enough for you to capture the fireworks in motion, and you can always change the shutter speed as you go along. I just want to make sure you have everything else set up so that you're not messing around with everything when you only have a couple of minutes while the fireworks are going off. A couple other things you want to make sure in your environment while you're setting up is this photo here. You can see that there's kind of lines going across it. I didn't actually notice that when I was taking the photos, and because it was pitch black outside when I was taking these photos. What actually was happening was I was shooting directly at some telephone wires that were going by. They didn't show up on a tiny screen because it's a tiny screen. When I got back on the computer, I blew it up. I'm like, oh no. So that's just something you might want to pay attention to beforehand, is make sure there's nothing obstructing the fireworks in the view when you're taking the photos. Otherwise, you might have something like this end up on you. So that's really all there is to it to awesome fireworks shots, is to make sure you have your settings dialed in before the fireworks start, and you have your framing set up how you want it to be, and there's nothing obstructing your view like telephone wires. And once you have all that, it's really simple. Just press the button. You're done. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, go ahead and hit that like button. It shows me that you, well, like the video, and I really appreciate it if you would. And if you want to see more videos like the one you just watched or the one here, then hit subscribe and you will be alerted to more videos from me in the future. So that's great. I'm on all the usual social media suspects, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff. Check it out. Lightning.com and all that, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.